What if there was a way to skip the hardest, most time-consuming part of miniature painting while tricking people's brains into thinking you're an amazing painter?
When you look at Warhammer box art or the pros on Instagram, there is one thing you almost always see: silky smooth blends. Unfortunately, blending can take hours of your life, potentially build up texture on your model, and in general cause great aggravation, destroy your soul and your model all at the same time.
But I don't think blending is necessary. So today, we're going to trick our brains to see a smooth gradation where there isn't one. The ground rules for this experiment are simple: no glazing, no wet blending, no feathering.
I'm testing this idea on two models, one Tyranid from Warhammer 40k, and then on the 75mm model
From Mindworks Studios.
The goal is to see if size or subject matter changes how well these techniques work. Okay, let's paint. I'm starting by painting the entire Tyranid a deep dark purple. I plan to paint the plates of this Tyranid red and the skin blue. Since purple is in between these colors on the color wheel, purple will create a more interesting shadow for both colors while unifying this model as a whole. Next is a slightly lighter purple on the plates, a mixture of Chimera purple, Chimera oxide red, and white.
I'm being conscious to leave enough space for my subsequent layers of midtones and highlights. Since I'm starting darker and moving my way lighter, each layer will be smaller and lighter than the previously applied layer.
It is important that each color be close in value, hue, and saturation to the previously applied color, leaving only a small border of our previous color visible. If the jumps between each layer is too big, the illusion of a smooth gradation will begin to fall apart. There are 3 mark-making techniques we'll be using in this video: hatching or cross-hatching, scumbling, and stippling. For these plates, we are using hatching. For hatching, each layer of paint should be applied with brush strokes right next to each other, leaving the spot where the brush first touched the model visible. By applying our colors roughly and leaving the visible brush strokes and ragged edge, we can trick the brain into seeing a gradation where there isn't one. Since we expect to see a smooth gradation, the brain will just fill in the gaps for us. However, our brain does not do that when there is a harsh, straight line between our layers. It's the texture of our brushstrokes that really helps sell this.
Another great thing about this no blend technique is that if you mess up, it's not that big of a deal.
Here I have realized my carapace is supposed to be red and I'm leaning very purple. I quickly apply my red oxide to the edges, then create a mixture of my red and my previously applied color and apply it right where those two coats meet, creating a brand new blend. We can also build a gradation with the direction of our paint strokes. Wherever we pick up the brush leaves an extra dollop of paint. By starting at the center and pulling the brush towards the outside, I'm naturally creating a blend of dark on the inside of each plate to lighter at the edges. Depending on the objects you are painting, the direction of your stroke could be very important. Here, I'm painting all of my strokes in the same direction, as that helps give a natural flow and direction to the plate.
But first, I want to talk about the other model I'm painting in this video from Mindworks Studios. The model I'm painting is inspired by Patrick J. Jones' Night of the Zombie. Mindworks Studios produces amazing, beautiful 75mm figures and busts, inspired by famous artists and with original works too. If you want sci-fi models, they have it. Fantasy models, that too. The models are beautifully sculpted and the casts are amazing. If you're interested in stepping out of tabletop miniatures and into the world of art, then you should give Mindworks Studios a look following the link in my description box.
You can also get 20% off using the code Lyla20.
Thanks so much, Mindworks Studios. Back to the video.
The skin is starting out much the same way as the carapace, but instead of pulling the brush in one direction over and over to create that sort of striation, I'm stabbing my round brush tip first into the model over and over, focusing first on the area that I want the most paint to be applied, and then moving outward as paint is gradually removed from the brush.
This technique is called Scumbling.
The goal is to create an organic pattern as quickly as possible by just jamming our paintbrush into the model.
Then I'm taking my lightest color and edge highlighting the most important areas like the grooves on his face. Whatever area is most important should always be the brightest.
Then it's just the little details like painting his joints and lining areas with black to help them stand out.
But before we reveal the Tyranid, let's see how these techniques work on a model that's on the complete opposite end of the model spectrum from our Tyranid friend.
Unlike my Tyranid, I did a quick zenithal on this model to allow my vibrant teal and lighter skin tones to really pop. I'm starting on the fabric, beginning with 2 layers of my midtone, this beautiful jade color. Then, using a large brush, I'm roughing in my shadows, mixing my jade midtone with chimera purple. Each layer is progressively smaller and darker than the layer before it. Again, I'm using that rough stroked pattern, pulling the brush towards the center of each of the shadows so those areas are the darkest. And again, this is repeated the same with the highlights. Similar techniques are used in painting the skin, where I use a mixture of hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, and scrumbling. Really, I'm just trying to cover as much space as I can because the model is so large.
And while I love how the fabric turned out on the front of this fabric, I'm not totally sold on the rest. But let's talk about why.
On the front of this fabric, my highlights are lined up one right after the other using the hatching technique like we did on the scales of the Tyranid. The problem is that on the back, I didn't follow the same line direction, instead crisscrossing my lines, stippling, or whatever else to get the values down. This mistake is also what happened on the skin tone. What I'm realizing is that it's really important to use the same mark-making technique when painting the same texture, especially if that texture is repeated all across the model and is rather large, like the skin and fabric. I'm also realizing that the different mark-making techniques can create the look of different materials. My lines right next to each other on the fabric created the look of taffeta, which was not what I was going for, but I will happily take it. While stippling and scrumbling created a far more realistic appearance of skin. Humans don't have lines on their skin, so hatching and cross-hatching just didn't look right. However, dots and speckles on human skin is completely realistic. So while it's great that we are creating the illusion of smooth blends, we do also need to fit inside the confines of the type of texture that our brain wants to see. Otherwise, the whole illusion is broken.
Alright, that's it from me. You know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, join me on Patreon. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.